Wausau Parks and Recreation Committee. Alder Watson is excused from tonight's meeting, so we have a quorum of members, so I'll look for a motion for approval of minutes of April 7th, 2024 meeting. Boy, this is really loud.
Move to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion by Alder Neal, second from Alder Lukens. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that passes unanimously. Item 2, discussion and possible action related to urban forestry presentation. Ms. Polly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm actually going to turn it over to our city forester, John Cahan, and our project engineer, I think. Is that right? TJ Nicknish. And they're going to talk about, John's going to go over a little bit about our EAB plan, where we're at with it, where we've been, kind of where we're going, and then talk about a grant that we received that's helping with EAB, as well as some planting sites. And then together they'll talk about kind of how we go about street reconstruction and what John's role is, what engineering's role is, what are some things we've tried, what some things we're looking forward to. Sometimes we can't avoid the tree removal, so they'll let them talk it through. So I'm going to introduce John, I think is starting, right? Okay. And I have the EAB plan that was approved by the committee in the packet for your review. So John, if you're going to reference it, I'll have it up on the TV so you can let me know.
Perfect. Thank you for having me. We'll start off by just talking about some of our EAB plan and then work into our removals, injections, and then talk about tree planting and a little bit about pruning as well. So the EAB plan was updated, I believe it was in 2020, late 2020, when we found EAB here in town. As you're all currently aware, we have it pretty heavily infested in town, see it everywhere. See a lot of our private residences actually in some pretty bad shape with EAB. So what we've been doing is, since 21, we've been really tracking our removals, where we're at, what we've been doing. So we've taken down 1,695 ash trees that we've tracked since roughly late 2019 when we started our tree keeper system, really starting to keep track of things. We had envisioned we had about 6,000 ash trees. We really had closer to 7 in the city. We have some of our uninventoried right-of-ways, they're wooded areas, so we have some additional ash there. There's going to add a few to our list, so we do have to maintain those as well. Those are not included in our inventory numbers. But in general, we've been removing roughly about 380, 370 trees, ash trees per year. That's what we've been focusing on, kind of just wavering just a little bit right in that neighborhood since 21. So that gives us a number that will put us roughly within our range of that 12 to 15-year removal and replacement time frame. We are actually shooting for the 12-year time frame because, as you know, life happens, things come up, there's bumps in the road. It gives us some time. If something happens where we have to push back some removals, we can do that, still within that time frame of that management plan. We still have 3317 inventoried ash in town. Additional, like I mentioned, in the wooded right-of-ways. Of those trees, we are doing injections on a portion of those trees. Obviously, the intention of the injections is to maintain trees so they don't die, and we can remove them at our pace. So we're in control of the insect, it's not controlling us, is the way we look at it. So the last 3 years, we've injected 742 last year, 948 in 23, and 873 in 22. And the reasons the slight differences are we actually take different portions of the city. So here in 25, we'll actually be re-injecting the northeast portion of the town. Going through that process, I go through and check each tree, what shape is it in, what's the location, is it by utilities, does it really need to come out, and we slowly whittle down that number. So we're looking really to take our streets, like Ashland Avenue was all ash trees. Our goal is to take and thin that and start replacing over time as opposed to removing all of them at once or big chunks at a time. And we continue to do, ash is still the only tree that if a resident requests a removal, we'll remove an ash tree upon request. We don't do that with other trees unless there's a specific reason for that. So we keep working through that. This year, we have left 806 trees in the city that are not on our injection list. So those are trees that are either in a little rougher shape or sited very poorly or are small trees. So we keep an eye on those. Those are our focus of our removals. But we also keep an eye on them. If they're looking really good, we just let them be for now. But if something should happen, they come out pretty quickly. So most of those are under 9 inches, so smaller trees. Each year, we're injecting less and less trees. So I kind of look at it like an amortization table where up front, a lot of interest you're paying, right? So we're injecting a larger number of trees. We're taking down a little bit less. As we go forward, we're injecting less. We're taking down a few more and replacing a few more. We're going to work slowly through that as we go. So it's just kind of the way I look at it a little bit. So as we keep going, less injections, more money is going to be put into that removal replacement side. Another note too, I actually made a note of this on here purposely. We do have some residents who want to keep the ash trees in the boulevard. Something they'd like to see. Boy, I really have a big ash tree. You can't replace that. It's a nice tree. We do allow residents to pay to have those trees injected themselves by a private company. So we have to talk to them. They have to let us know. We allow those to stay. As long as they inject them, those trees are alive and healthy, they stay. Should they stop injecting them or something should happen to the tree, we'll still remove it as normal. But we have a few residents, I'd say there's 3 or 4 who really like to keep their trees, so we do allow that. They just have to contact our office. So in case you have residents in your neighborhoods, that's something we will do. So in looking at all those removals we're talking about, last couple of years, just in total removal-wise, we've gone from around 800 trees to about 900 trees a year in removals. Some of that has to do with some of our bigger removal projects from the engineering projects. Some has to just do with EAB that we're finding in town, increasing some of those numbers. But when we get back down to planting, we're planting roughly about 525 trees a year now. When I first started here, we were about 430, so we've about 100 more trees a year. Part of that is we are looking at a little better sourcing, more sources, less sources, so more from one place, save on some shipping. We're also working with some of our communities, groups, donating some money towards plantings. So we have some things like our fruit orchards that are going in. We have some Earth Day plantings, like that's the Earth Day planting. We have WPS, which is donating money for planting. So a few things like that as well is really helping us just bump some of those numbers up. That being said, we still are falling short of those removals. You're talking 900-ish removals a year, planting 540, you're still 350, 400 short a year. So that's just part of our budget. That's what we can do and get done. Our goal is to replace all those ash trees that are being removed specifically. We try to get those back for residences. Anyone who wants one, we try to get a tree in as quickly as possible. For other removals, we do the best we can and basically kind of start in our oldest and move forward. If someone really wants a tree, we try to get a tree in there as soon as possible. Put in trees, you've probably seen them around town, 1 3/4, 2 inch, nicer sized trees. So they're pretty impactful, a pretty quick tree. And actually being got a lot of compliments. We just did a whole bunch of planting in Eau Claire Boulevard. It actually looks pretty nice. The trees are all quite sizable. So, and hopefully you're able to speak with those residents there too. So keep working through those. The other big thing on the planting side, which you're all quite aware of, is the grant planting. So we put out a bid for that. We did get Legacy Trees that won that bid. Their pricing was absolutely wonderful. We had planned on planting 300 trees per year for 3 years. Because of their pricing, we plant 415 trees. So they actually came back really well priced. They put in 180 this spring. And so we're kind of going through that process with them, kind of tweaking some of the things we did, how we did it. So it'll be a little bit better for fall. We'll put the rest of those 415 in this fall as the plan. So extremely excited about that. If residents want trees in their boulevards, just let us know, as we're going to try to pick from those oldest group that have been going the longest and really fill in through. Those are focused in our qualified neighborhoods. So for the city, so it's about 50% of the city. So what we're doing internally is we're focusing on those areas outside of that to try to keep it even planting. So we're trying to be fair to everybody is what we're trying to do. So we won't put all of our plantings in the same area. We're trying to get everywhere in the city touched is what we're trying to do.
How many did, instead of, was it
300.
300 planned, and how many?
415.
Okay,
So what the price came up to. So 115 extra trees.
Nice.
And we have in our contract the ability to extend with them. We'll see what their pricing looks like for extending. If we can keep a good price like that, we certainly would. So it's actually really excited about that. Along with all the work we're doing here, pruning, if you've seen around town, is one of the more difficult things for us with all the removals and everything we're doing. Our block pruning, as they used to call it, you go down neighborhoods and prune all the trees. We haven't done that for many years. And unfortunately, many cities aren't doing a lot of that right now. We're dealing with EAB, doing with all those other things we need to do, trying to get trees planted, just eating up our man hours. So what we're really focused on this last couple of years, specifically since I've been here and just really viewing our forest, is we're focusing on our small tree terrain pruning. So you'll see a lot of our small trees, what we affectionately call them white eyes. When you cut the trees that you expose to white wood, you see those cuts. You see a lot of our small trees with lots of cuts in them. We're trying to make that tree have a good form and structure for future. A lot of the large trees we have in town, the structure is not really great. And when you start changing structure when they're large, you make big cuts which decay. So our focus is growing that forest for a longer term, a longer lived forest. That's what we're focusing on. So we're focusing on those small trees. Still attending to all of our calls that come in for people who have concerns or blocking views or low branches, that stuff, still taking care of those, but we're not focused on full block pruning of that in general. So that's where we put our focus on pruning. I guess any questions on that? I had a whole bunch of stuff I put out there. And I can provide numbers if anyone's interested, I can do that.
Well, I will have some questions at some point about a few things, so I don't know if now is the time or not. You have more for your presentation you want to cover first?
I was going to actually, if there's no questions to that, we can roll over to the street construction side, because I think that was part of our, last part of our
Okay.
discussion.
Good, thank you.
Perfect. So when we start talking about street construction, obviously concern is we're losing a lot of trees to these big construction projects. I want to go through the process that I go through when engineering puts together a plan for a street, kind of how I look at this, how we work through this, and we work together to get to the end result of what we have. So engineering puts together all the construction plans, all the streets to be redone, all the information, and gets that over to me. So I get a full set of plans with all the digging, what they're doing, the construction, excavation portions of that. And so the first thing I do when I look at that is, obviously our ash trees are marked for removal. We take ash trees out of that system. So ash trees come out of those streets. The second thing we're looking at is, or I say I'm looking at, is trees that are in fair to poor condition. Those trees are obviously failing, they're not doing well. Once we put the stresses of construction on them, they're not going to fare well, most likely going to die fairly quickly from that process. So those typically come out. Next portion I really look closely at is the excavation portions where utilities are. In the past, one of the things we've seen, I'm talking many years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago, trees were measured and planted. So it didn't matter what utility was there, water line right next to the driveway, those things, trees were just planted based on spacing. Obviously, when they're digging up water and sewer lines, tree can't be standing there, so those trees typically come out. There's some cases we can work with small trees, but large trees can't handle that excavation, can't do those things. They really shouldn't have been planted there in the first place. So those trees are marked for removal. Next portion is, well, actually, I should mention this too. When trees are close, it might be 3-4 feet from the tree. We talk to engineering, say, what are we doing here? What kind of soils are we dealing with? Can we excavate here? So we try to save those trees that are reasonable to save. There are times when we look at trees, say this tree is likely to not survive 4 or 5 years from construction, but we save them to retain canopy for short term. So we do things like that with the assumption that that tree is likely not to survive or it's going to survive poorly. And we replace that in 4 or 5 years, make that decision at that time. So we do make those decisions as well. Then the last list of trees is the more difficult ones to really assess. So what I'm doing out there with the trees that remaining outside that list is I'm looking at, number one, the size of the tree. Obviously, larger trees have more root area that's needed to survive and maintain structural stability. The species of tree, some are very sensitive to construction, like a sugar maple. They do not like root disturbance. Elms are actually very tough. They can handle quite a bit of disturbance. Where the excavation will take place. Several of these trees will have the sidewalk being redone, utilities on 2 sides, and the curb being done. So now we're cutting roots on 4 sides, 3 sides. How is that going to affect the tree's ability to survive? And number one, I'm looking at is risk assessment, the tree's ability to stand and not fall. So when we look at those items, number one, like I said, is the risk of falling because of severed support roots. So a general rule of thumb for a tree support is 3 times the diameter of the tree. General rule of thumb, because each tree is slightly different, each site's different, different soil types make it a little bit differently, so that's a general rule of thumb. So a 25-inch tree needs 75 inches of structural root stability. Obviously, when you're looking at the tree on the curbside, most trees don't have that, right? You might have a foot, that base of the tree, and then the curb's a foot away. So that's even more important in that area. When the construction company's coming in replacing curb, they need a foot behind the curb to replace their curb. So everything a foot back is going to be completely dug down. They're putting gravel in. So that's where our biggest concern comes in as far as stability of trees, is that foot from the curb, because that's a very small area. We need to retain that as much as we can. So that's our biggest concern, is that stability area along that side of the curb. So that makes it very difficult to save, especially our larger trees. The smaller the tree, obviously, the smaller area we need for stability. So that's something, a discussion point, I guess, that we're looking at is how can we maybe look at some things there. But when I look at a tree for assessment of standing and survivability and long-term staying power, that's the things I'm looking at. So I get questions.
Well, a number of things, I guess. First, I'll just the most recent thing you mentioned about curbs, the distance that they take, like a foot in from the curb towards the tree. Some years back when we had the Milwaukee tree czar here, he discussed that issue at length and how they handle that down there. He's really like a tree. We're going to save the tree if we can possibly, and find ways to do it that aren't traditional. He mentioned that they utilize some sort of, I don't know what the word for it is, like a rig of some kind for putting in curbs that doesn't use that traditional method of going in a foot, away, towards the tree, but rather stops at the curb itself and somehow, I don't know, it's a form or whatever. It's a special piece of structural stuff that they use on street trees like that. So, I mean, this is something we talked about way back then, and I don't know what happened in terms of following up on that, getting that kind of a, apparatus here and making it part of our thing. Because, well, at the time, I don't know how many years ago this was, Lisa, I was like 9 years ago, something like that, 8 years ago, or
Something like that. We
Yeah.
had a collaborative session with
Yeah.
SISM to manage street construction and tree conflict at the
Yeah.
same time.
I mean, we had a lot of, I even say almost impassioned discussions about the value of street trees, or trees in general. Their contribution to the character of the city and to neighborhoods and whatnot. The real estate value and other, benefits to wildlife and to, cooling and everything you could think. It's just, we really dug deep on this, no pun intended. And did put together a wish list of best practices going forward. It was at a meeting of this committee, was our last meeting, where I kind of got on my soapbox. I was kind of mad because the 600 block of Fulton looks like downtown Dodge City right now at high noon. There's one tree left there. 18 were taken down. One was left in the whole block. Totally transforming the character of that block, and for the people that live there to look out their windows and now go, where did my neighborhood go? Where did my feeling of, beauty here go? I'm staring at a house now across the street. I'm looking at nothing but blue sky out there. And it made me think that, well, this committee is taxed with being the authority on the city's street tree system. I guess park trees as well. But specifically, I mean, we are tasked with that, to stand as an influence or even a say-so on what we do with our street trees. That's why we had those really lengthy discussions years ago and really wanted to have a different way of doing things and get away from the straight line engineer's point of view and find ways to be creative to save these valuable assets. When I saw that 600 block of Fulton, I just said, okay, what went on here? Was there an audit? We surely weren't aware of it. We weren't involved in any kind of discussion of the relative value of a single tree on that block. And they all went away except for one. Kind of a smallish tree. It's a nice sized tree, but it's the only tree in the whole block now. And you go down like a 500 block of Fulton, same thing. I don't know if there's a tree on that block anymore. You go on the 400 block of Fulton, a straight line of stumps. It's like, oh, we're going to do road construction here, so the trees got to go. And I really want to find that we change that and that we find ways to work around. And yeah, I know some trees are going to have to go. But I maintained at our last meeting that out of like 18 trees on that block, if 6 were saved, we would have had some semblance of the character of that block maintained. I really hope that we can have some kind of system of audit, tree by tree, and make decisions, of things that fall under our aegis here, and not just have it be, business as usual, like we've seen. It's transformative in a very negative way for the city. And we talk about our canopy, and our canopy is going away. In my lifetime, I'm not going to see it returned on that block, or those blocks of Fulton Street. I'm going to see, tiny little trees, and no sense of, grandeur or whatnot. I don't know what genus of trees those 18 were that were taken down. I don't know what their root system required by current standard practices. I do know that there was a tree years ago, I just use as an example, down in Hamilton Street in the 700 block, a large tree, and there was a sidewalk replacement done there. And I remember walking by that tree when the sidewalk had, the base, the forms were in, and they had, removed soil and all that, and I saw where, roots this big were just cut off to make way for the sidewalk. And that tree went. A stiff breeze came up, within, I don't know, weeks, and down it went into the street. I think it even landed on a car. And I thought at the time, why would they do this? Is there no better way to handle this? I brought up the example of a house on McIndoe that had large trees on the boulevard. I don't know how many decades ago this was, but they actually, circumnavigated them on the sidewalk. Just a little meandering sidewalk. Probably had to do an easement arrangement with the residents, and they probably thought, sure, go for it. I don't need a straight line sidewalk, just go around it. But that tree at the corner of 8th and Hamilton, very nice tree, but it was lost because of practices. And I don't think it had to be. And what I want to find going forward is, maybe I'd love a report on the 600 block of Fulton as to what was the disposition of those trees, the 18 that went. Some of them were quite massive, some of them were more medium-sized, but they all went. I don't know if they were all ash, I don't know if they were all diseased, I don't know if they were, poor health, or just unfortunately placed. But placed they were, and were there for a lifetime. And I seriously, from where I sit on this and on council, I'm gonna be like, was it the Lorax that speaks for the trees? And we just have to stop it. So what I want to look at, can we have a system in place with this committee where we are part of the process and have the ability to impact decisions? And I know we're going to say sure when it's appropriate. Say sure, yeah, the tree's got to go, no complaint. But that tree maybe doesn't have to. Give us a solution on that tree or that tree. And that's what I want our role to be, if possible. So I'll yield for now, and I might have more to say. Thanks.
No, thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. And actually, several of those questions, TJ will be able to answer better than I could, some of that stuff.
I have just a quick question, I guess, to follow up with that. We have some cross-membership between this committee and the infrastructure committee, which is valuable. So I would suggest that, I don't know that we necessarily need to remove or save trees by committee, but I think we need to rekindle a conversation that ends with robust dialogue and networking between the city forester and engineering pre-construction. And so that's where we were going with it a number of years ago. But I will say that since we launched that effort, everyone who was involved in it is gone, and there are new people in those seats. So, in the staff seats. So I think maybe with the exception of Eric Lindman, everyone else has pretty much changed over since we had those conversations. And, methods may have even changed since then for things. So I think as long as there's a robust dialogue between somebody that knows everything about trees and a group of people that know everything about streets and sidewalks, like, they should be able to come to some type of meeting of the minds for what is salvageable or not, and then maybe figure out ways to design boulevards and sidewalks so that trees grow better. We were kind of having some of that discussion before this meeting is, 40 years ago, they'd plant a tree in the middle of a concrete sidewalk with a metal grate around it and then no dirt and wonder why it didn't grow. They were all over around the mall. Most of those are now gone. So, I mean, we're like capable of evolving, and so are the methods, but I think that, and they've got a really good new method for the trees they're putting in that neighborhood where the mall used to be now, which is something we've not implemented here before. So, you know, I think the staff is capable of managing it. I think we just need to get the dialogue going in the infrastructure committee so that you guys are all involved together. Like during the design process, I think is where it really needs to start, especially on major streets. You know, if it's just a, you know, small stretch here and there, it's probably not as big of a deal. But if it's, you know, like Fulton, or if it's like Randolph Street, or it's like Kent Street, where you have, you know, 8 blocks cut, that maybe is something where they need to have that networking on the front end. So I guess I'd like to restart that conversation, you know, and I guess it would be up to Alder Henke to restart it in infrastructure. But you guys are both on there, so you can carry some of that dialogue forward and, you know, facilitate that, you know, even if we need to redevelop that plan where we started a number of years ago, we can maybe even come out with something better yet. Thank you.
Follow up, on the, knowing that trees, some trees have to go and be replaced, the timing of that, to me, it kind of looks like the tree goes down and the stump lays there. It's not removed at, you know, in quick order. It just stays there for months and months and months, maybe until the next year, till it's finally, you know, taken out. And then finally, perhaps, you know, a sapling is dropped in there. And I'm like, more like, shouldn't this all be like, you know, 1, 2, 3, you know, remove the tree, remove the stump, and bring in the replacement? You know, I think that any resident who saw, you know, a beloved tree go down, at least could feel like, well, they put one in, and not spend a year, year and a half, or I don't know how long, before a replacement tree comes. You know, at least that idea of, you know, it's being, you know, at least we have something to look at. Why do we have that lag? And also the numbers don't match up. It's like the numbers taken out and potential replacements. There's a gap there. Can't we, you know, manage those numbers so there's like, you know, 1 per each kind of thing, and then tighten up the timeline? I don't know what the optimum time of the year to plant is, but maybe that's also tied to the optimum time of the year to take out, so that we can take out the stump and put in the tree, make it a process, you know, rather than that big wait. So anything to say about that?
Sure. Actually, engineering can answer the question of the process. They handle all that. We don't do the removals on the park side. They handle the whole process. But as far as the planting, we do plant, basically, the old plantings are just measured out, like I said, just plopped in wherever they lined out. We go back in and work between utilities, and we like to keep 30 to 40-foot spacing on those trees. So we end up losing trees because there's places we can't put some back in. We try to squeeze in places. We try to stay away from utilities, driveways. So a lot of times we end up with a few less than we started with, and just try to squeeze them in. Sometimes we're much too close together. So that's why those numbers change. And plus some of our infrastructure does change as well. But as far as speaking to the process and all that stuff, engineering handles that. So TJ, I can turn over to him if that's okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may add to that.
Go right ahead, Ms. Powell.
As far as to replacement, is we're giving a certain budget every year of how many trees we can replace with that budget. So we've brought back that to council a few times of increasing that budget, knowing that we're falling behind. And it hasn't been increased in the last couple of budget cycles, because obviously we have to pick our priorities of what we have, but that's part of the also reason why we aren't necessarily keeping up with plantings to the number of removals based on the EAB plan that we're going through, and then also street reconstructions that are taking place.
Go ahead, TJ. Hi.
What's going on, Alder Larson? So I guess I'll start off with I think your first question was on that piece of machinery that you were speaking of earlier. And that, John and I were talking about, and that, I believe what you're thinking of is the slip-form curb machine. That's all what our crews use now. So that takes away from, that helps limiting the amount behind the curb that you have to get to. But the reason why.
Can you talk into the mic more?
The reason, is it good now?
Yeah.
The reason why we go 1 foot behind the curb. That's actually in our design and has nothing to do with the contractor. And maybe that can be looked at a little bit, but that's to help with the integrity of that curb. If you don't improve those soils behind it, that curb can become deteriorated rather quickly if the curb starts to fall back because the soil stabilization behind it's not there, or you have poor soils underneath the curb and creates a frost heave. If you get any gaps, because that's where all your stormwater runs is on that curb, and as soon as you start getting water to infiltrate in there, your curb base or your road base starts to suck in all that water, and that's where you get your loose pockets, that's where you get your frost heave, and that's what leads to the deterioration of your road. So we go 1 foot behind our curb with aggregate to help that stability of the curb. That curb machine probably only needs about 6 inches behind the back of curb to run their machinery and to put that curb in, but that's only maybe 6 inches we could gain, but it's something. The other item is road width. The city ordinance states that all residential streets should be between 33 and 37 feet at the back of curb. Since I've been here, we have not increased the width of the road. We have, substantially decreased the width of the road in some areas, substantially, going from 37 to 33. We look at the traffic. We look at what types of traffic. Is it heavy traffic? Is it bus traffic? Is it a bus route? Do we want bike lanes? All of that has a different effect on what the width of the roadway is going to be. So that's probably the biggest factor is just the width of the road and the narrow boulevards. The other item is the utilities, mostly the services. Most of the main work that goes in is far enough away from the trees that it doesn't affect the trees themselves. But those services, they're typically at least 7 feet deep. So you have to be, you're going to be getting right into that tree if you're within 5 to 6 feet of that tree. So we don't really have a whole lot of leeway there. What else? Some of the countermeasures, in the last 5 years, some of the items that we've been incorporating into our design is a tree root barrier. This came from John, I think Andy before him. It was an idea they had that they brought to engineering, and it's we install about 14 feet of this plastic barrier between the sidewalk and where potential tree sites are, and that helps the tree roots. They can't go into that barrier, so they have to go underneath. So we've been doing that at every single tree site. John comes out, stakes where the tree sites are going to be, and then the following year, that's where they'll plant the trees. As far as the lag between when we remove the trees and when they're planted, the last couple of years since we've had some lighter winters, our DPW crews have been looking for work to do, and if we can save money from having them cut our trees before we actually start construction, we let them come in and do that. So then it sits from January, February until our crews start up here in May, June. So that's what no, it doesn't look good, but they'll be removed this year, and I usually don't plant until the following year. But are there any other questions?
So in the case of, and I guess it's my, worst case scenario, that 600 block of Fulton Street, completely transformed, aside from one tree. There's a pretty large variety of sizes. I can't tell you all the species, but from rather massive to, more normal, you might say. Do you foresee going forward that we can find a way to be more transitional rather than, that kind of clear-cut type approach? I mean, I would really have liked to seen, that block, for example, retain 6, 7, 8 trees, and maybe lose 10. But let's do something. Sure, best practice, like to you know, shore up the curb, the new curb or whatnot. I understand the reason for that, but, you know, to me, 5 feet of curb is not as worth as much as that beautiful tree. I'd rather, you know, fix a curb if it starts to, you know, heave or fall back or crumble or whatever. I'd rather fix that over the course of 3 or 4 years or 5 years rather than wait 25 years for the tree to kind of be replaced in similar fashion in terms of size and whatnot. I think I'm just I'm gonna follow this, you know, until I kind of feel that we've reached a point where our philosophy is different, and that we can be more transitional and less, have a lot less impact on the quality of life, quality of aesthetic in our neighborhoods. You know, if we're going to be like a bird city, then we need trees. You know.
Yeah, that's something, you know, when we finish up or get close to our, you know, finished design, we hand it off to John. John goes through and marks which ones he thinks, and then there's always some questionable ones. And then me and him go and take rides, and, you know, for those questionable ones, you know, maybe we'll have to start leaning the other way rather than, well, it's probably going to die in 3 to 5 years. Well, maybe it's going to live 10 to 15, you know. So that's something we can look at.
I really think we need to think that way. It's how do we prolong? You know, it's almost like a medical patient. Yeah, you know, your quality of life. You know, we're going to try and keep you, you know, upright and breathing for another, you know, 6 years, and we'll do everything we can because, you know, you're a human and you need to be, you know, protected, and our trees also need to be protected. And I think that we can have a method of prolonging. Rather than forestalling, you know, what could be, you know, a number of good years for that tree and for the neighborhood. And pragmatically, of course, take down the trees that are the worst case and replace them as we can. But we really need to, I think, find a way to not, well, I'll use the word again, be so transformative.
You know, perhaps now that the word is out there, TJ could come back with some kind of, you know, talk with Alan or Eric and sit down and reevaluate how they do things and bring it back to us at the infrastructure committee. Would that sound acceptable?
Yes, you know, these are a lot of case-by-case basis, so I don't know that our design practice per se is going to change a ton. It's going to have to be, you know, when we get to that site, what can we do at that individual site? You know, and maybe that, yeah, we'll have to hand form curb there and not go back even a foot. You know, if there's one tree that we're trying to save, so be it.
Mr. Chair, I wonder if, you know, it's at all possible if the Milwaukee trees might make a reappearance here.
What's that, say that again?
The man from Milwaukee that runs their tree program down there, their street tree program. He was here about 8 years ago.
We could look into that, couldn't we, Miss Jamie?
That was like during Bill's tenure.
Yeah, we can look into it and see who's there. And John, do you have contact with
Yeah.
Milwaukee ever? Yeah, we
I
can
mean,
see
he's
who's
like
there.
the tree whisperer. You know, a whole different way of looking at stuff. So,
Sure.
If it gives us some ideas, why not, you know?
But, you know, one option or two is, you know, before we start removing trees, we can give a report of how many trees are on the project, how many we're removing, how many we're keeping, and then, you know, maybe have another third category, how many, you know, that were on the fence, but we decided needed to be removed or something along those lines.
We could do that too, but I'm guessing what Alder Neal is suggesting, that if we bring the tree people here, we might all learn something, you know, and be able to look at something with a different eye.
Yeah.
I don't even know if that man is still, you know, employed and still in that role or anything, you know. He was pretty fascinating in terms of what he brought to the table.
Or Rasmussen.
Thank you. I guess I have just a quick follow-up. A while back, and I want to say it was also happened in the SISM committee, as we started to adopt a policy internally or look at when a street was up for redesign, we would look at that street holistically. Is it safe? Is it well-lit? Is it wide enough? Is it bike ped friendly? Like, are there improvements that could be made from a design standpoint? And fed right into that at the time was the trees. Like, what does the tree canopy look like? And, you know, is it salvageable? Does it need to be modified? You know, and I think in terms of design, you know, like when infrastructure and facilities is going through and planning what those projects will be to put in for them for the budget, you know, as they're looking at like what that cross-section would be, that's, I think, where it would be useful to know what the tree inventory is, what it will become, what's like, what's being taken down and what's being put back up, just in terms of raw numbers. You know, and I just think that would be a component of the design. So as they are looking at, what at least they should still be looking at, that street as a whole, rather than just design what's there, because we used to just design what was there and rebuild what was there the exact same way. And then we started to look at, do we need something to be better or different? Like, is it unsafe? Are the trees a species that are disruptive to the sidewalk? Like, is the tree canopy too robust so it's pitch dark? Do we need more lights? Like, all of the things that go into like rethinking that, you know, and then you kind of back into, well, what needs to be changed and then what can we afford? And, you know, depending, I mean, there's a lot of decisions that get made, but I think right at the point of beginning is where it would be useful to have those numbers for what's out there in terms of ecology and what needs to be restored and what we'll come out with when we're done. So I think, you know, in infrastructure and facilities, if they don't already have a policy like that from before, should certainly adopt one, because we had that in play and it was going real well. So, I mean, I don't know if we've kind of moved away from that or it's less intense than it was, but our goal was that those same questions get asked every time there's a rebuild.
Well, I'll have the discussion with Alder Hanky
Okay.
when I can to kind of get that ball rolling.
Sorry, if I may, real quick, actually, you bringing that up, I appreciate you bringing that up. Just this last month, we had discussion with them regarding some of our habitat houses and some of our construction projects. We requested to be put in that process to assess a canopy. We just did that on the Second Street project. So that's the first time we've done that from my standpoint, from the city forester standpoint. We've assessed some of the trees along the Second Street project, proposed project. And I know I've had some times where the habitat houses, part of the contract when it was sold was cut down the street trees, put a house in, and then plant new ones right as soon as they're cut down because they put the house in. So we're starting to look at those things a little more closely, saying, why are we doing these things? So I appreciate the info.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Any other questions or conversation?
Thanks.
Okay, then we'll go on to item number 3, where there's educational items, there's none, correct? Unless, and item 4 is future agenda items. Anybody have any?
I do possibly have one. So I didn't have a chance to get it on the agenda for any discussion tonight because I just got notice of this officially on Friday. But we unfortunately had our vendor for River Life concession that we chose for health reasons or family health concerns had to pull out for this summer at the moment. So I may be asking the committee for a special meeting coming up as we as a staff think of some ideas. It's too late to do another RFP for the summer, and our second vendor had withdrew already before the end of the last RFP. So talking with my staff just today, because I didn't have a chance to talk to him on Friday, he was out, but Mark Darrow is our recreation supervisor who I'm kind of talking about with this, because we run the junction and stuff like that, and talking about what our capabilities are, or maybe what some outside of the box ideas might be. Briefly, we talked about a few, but we want to clean those up and then maybe bring them back to you as a committee, because if it has to do with us doing any work there with staffing or providing any services, there's a cost to that. We might have some other ideas where it wouldn't be a cost, but it would still provide some services down there. So I just wanted to throw that out there, that you may just watch for an email from me to possibly June meeting may be too late to really start something, so I might want to try to move a little faster.
That's acceptable. Thank you, Jamie. Then I'll look forward to your email.
Do you have some?
Next meeting date is Monday, May 2nd, 2025 at 5:15 in council chambers here. Oh. Is it, June 2nd? Yeah, you're right. All right, next meeting is Monday, June 2nd, 2025 at 5:15. And on to item number 6 is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Motion by Alder Watson, second by Lukens and Neal. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.